Hi, everybody. Good morning. This week, we're going to be completing our final project based on the stories we have read in Unit 4. We're going to be writing a cross-text thematic essay. This is an excellent opportunity for our ENL students to build up their writing skills that will come into play in their future English classes as well as in their content classes. It's a good time to review some of the stories they've read in the previous weeks of this unit. Students will be answering a do now warm-up question, saying how are the texts different, how are the texts similar, which text was your favorite. So this is a good time to review some of the texts and to address some of the main themes and main ideas that we read about in the texts. At this time, teachers could introduce to students what a cross-text thematic essay is and what it includes and what its purpose is. So you can see there's a Freyer model involving the cross-text thematic essay, our definition, putting it in other words, illustrating what it includes, and things it's not. It's also helpful to look over the various parts of the word. What does cross-text mean? What does cross mean? What does text mean? What does thematic mean? What does essay mean? Students will be completing a graphic organizer to help them gather information that they'll be using during the writing process. Now, it's up to the teacher's discretion how many stories she wants her students or each student to include in the graphic organizer. Now, it's an option to have students complete the graphic organizer for all the stories, since they've read all the stories, or for students to choose their top 2 or 3, or even 1 story to complete. It may be helpful to maybe do one together as a class, as a model, and to have students do a number on their own. Again, we want to support students, but we also want to help facilitate them becoming more independent with the writing process. So there's access to this document in the Video Adapted Resources folder, which is very helpful for students, where teachers could put the graphic organizer, the outline, and then later students can write a rough draft on the same document. So they could be using their writing, their information from the prior steps, and using that to assist them in the next step as well. As you can see, there's a number of models that have been done, sentence starters, and significant modeling. It may be very helpful to also introduce the format of the essay and to even explain the concept of writing essays in an organized format. So we'll return back to that during the lesson. There's a number of final activities if time remains, but this is a good opportunity to review the steps in writing a cross-text thematic essay, a good chance to have the students discuss which texts they're thinking about writing. It's definitely important to check up on students and make sure they have a good understanding of which text they'll use, as that's sort of necessary before they could begin to move on to the later steps. You could further discuss the essential question to help aid in students' analysis of the texts. And finally, an important task that may carry over into the next lesson is to look at a sample essay. So that sample essay could be found at this link, and it's a sample cross-thematic essay using 2 different texts, but the concept is very similar and the format is very similar. It may be somewhat advanced for some of our students, but it may also be helpful to give them a sense of what may be expected and of what a final well-written essay should look like. So with that being said, let's jump right into today's lesson. Can somebody please read today's essential question for us? Good. How do we overcome difficulties? So again, this has been our essential question throughout the unit, and all of the stories have dealt with this topic about overcoming difficulties. Can somebody please read today's lesson objectives? Good. To develop personal, cultural, and thematic connections to texts and big ideas. Good. Students are going to start to notice how the different texts have the same themes and central ideas, and how those ideas connect, and even how the characters go through similar experiences and relate to one another. The second one, good. To gather information from multiple sources, assessing the relevance, and integrating the information into writing. Good. Students are going to be using evidence, quotes from the various texts that they've read, and then analyze those quotes. And they're going to be practicing citing their evidence and developing that evidence in their writing. And we'll be providing writing strategies to assist our students with doing that. Now, let's take a quick look at our review question for our Do Now warm-up routine. Now, let's reflect back on the texts we've read. Over the course of this unit, we have read 5 texts that all touched on the theme of overcoming challenges and getting stronger. These are the texts we read. How are the texts different? How are the texts similar? Which text was your favorite and why? You can give students a moment at this point to share out. Some students may say, the texts were similar because all of the stories involved people making changes in their lives. The texts were different because they all involved different types of people doing different things. My favorite text was Inside Out because I was able to relate to Francisco's experiences. Now, at this time, the teacher could review the CrossText thematic essay and the different expectations that are part of this essay and what type of essay this is. So the purpose for today's lesson. The first step towards putting together a CrossText thematic essay is to read, and you already did that, so congrats. The next step is to review the text and begin to find out how they connect to the theme, and that is what we are going to do today. Students are going to work on this graphic organizer, where they'll be getting the main ideas from the text that they want to use in their essay. And this is going to be the main part of today's lesson. It's important for the teacher to thoroughly explain this and to model it as much as possible. Depending on the level of the students, it may be necessary to include more or less model examples. But as you could see, included in this is sample answers to at least 2 of the texts, using both Laura's Key and Inside Out. It's good to also provide students with some type of writing strategy, such as this one called a C response, statement, evidence, explanation. So using a strategy like this is going to be very beneficial to students, so they'll know to introduce their quote, make either a statement or a restatement based on the question, introduce the quote with a statement. The evidence is the quote itself, and it's common to use the sentence starter the text states, or there's a number of other sentence starters provided as well, sentence prompts. For example, for instance, in the text, in paragraph such and such, and other sentence prompts for students to use. Sentence prompts for explaining evidence. This shows, this means, this illustrates, this reveals, this highlights. So it's very important for students to do the best they can with gathering this initial information. And this could easily be adjusted depending on the writing ability of either the individual students in your class or the class as a whole. Again, it may be helpful to go through one of these lines in detail and to even maybe find additional evidence or practice writing additional responses with students. Now, finally, teachers can, if time remains, they can address some of the closing and connecting activities, reviewing the first step towards writing a thematic essay, asking students to go back and to share which texts were the easiest for them to find evidence for. You could further talk about the essential question, and students could share possibly examples from their own life, which could then be incorporated into their essay. And again, they could review the format of the sample cross-text thematic essay. So it's important for your students to begin to build up their skills without feeling overwhelmed. They'll have plenty of time and plenty of support throughout this week to continue to build up their skills and to improve their writing. So I think your students will really enjoy this essay assignment, since there's a lot of support and scaffolding provided for them, and it will help them gain confidence in their writing abilities. So I hope you will enjoy this lesson, and I hope you will begin to review the importance of a cross-text thematic essay. Thank you so much, and enjoy the lesson.